I had a comment in one of the previous videos about what is design process. And the comment was, you didn't really explain what a design process is. And it's probably true. I sort of replied in the comment to sort of explain it, but I thought I'd do another video as a part two to what is a design process to clarify that. And my previous video that I actually recorded before this was actually a little bit too elongated and a little bit too blurry. So I thought I'll do a little bit more shorter and also get into the spatial thinking framework a little bit and what the difference really is. So basically, as I mentioned before in the first video, that design process shouldn't be referring to the business of design process, meaning business can be a design business or an architectural business, and they would have a business process, basically concept design, detail design, and heading into construction and prototyping and all that kind of stuff. If you ask somebody about what the design process is, and if they state those business processes, it's probably because they're not completely engaged in the intrinsic nature of the design process. What I'm really talking about in terms of design process is that specific part at the beginning, or it could be in different parts throughout the process, but is specifically relating to the design of the product or service or building. Okay, it is normally for architects anyway at the beginning of the process, where we go from scratch practically. We input some data, we output some kind of amazing result, and then we finalize the design to some degree, and then that can go into the next phase. It's that specific process. Now, the reason why I differentiate between a business process is because in that business process, all they really talk about is sort of concept design or sketch design phase, concept design phase, and then detail design. It doesn't talk about exactly how to get to a strong outcome in those phases. It's just we're going to do some kind of concept design. We're going to do some early design phases and we're going to detail it out. But a designer doesn't think in just these phases because it doesn't tell us how to not exactly guarantee an outcome, but I like to sort of think of it as guaranteeing some kind of innovative design outcome. I need some kind of process that's going to make me always, repeatedly, consistently produce powerful outcomes. And that business process doesn't cut it, right? And so that's really what that design process is. Now, if you ask any designer, and if they do tell you some kind of personalized design process, and it's not the business process, but it's like, I do it in this way, or I like to do it like this, or I tend to sort of do this, but sometimes I'll do this and do that, right? You might get a variety of different design processes, and that is reflecting how university, high school, and the profession considers a design and creative process. Loose, open-ended, can't always guarantee results, not so much a waste of time per se, but time expensive, could potentially be time wasting. And that's probably why the value of design or design process has sort of decreased. Either it's been decreasing or it is decreased or whatever, because, I mean, there's many reasons for this, but one of the naive reasons that I can come up with for spatial thinking would be the lack of a structured process. Now, if I can define the design process as almost scientific that can always guarantee results, wouldn't you then kind of think, well, maybe design doesn't have to be such a time waster, right? That's what the spatial thinking framework, the design process in that framework does. We provide a very structured, effective, and efficient in a way, process that guarantees innovative outcomes. Now, in order for me to teach the design process well enough, we have to at least touch upon, or not master, you can't really always master this, but we have to touch upon at least the personal process. Because a strong designer or any design project, as much as you can think a group of people or you can design by committee, as much as we work in teams, end of the day, design inherently comes from the personal touch of somebody, whether it's a group of people that are very well synced, but it still ends up being at the hands of somebody. You could say AI these days, that's different. in some ways, AI is a culmination of many human touches, except they've lost the context of things, which means the AI is not responding to the intrinsic response of the initial project problem because you are using prompts to do that, which then, anyway, it's almost like a statistical human touch response. So we're not going to go into that yet. I'll touch upon that in another video, perhaps. But at the end of the day, design comes from, the personal touch. Someone's got to put their hands on it by pen, by mouse, whatever. There's a human personalized touch to it. And innovation itself is defined by novelty. It is defined by human novelty specifically, not logical novelty or not trying to do things that have never been done before. Innovation is actually defined as a novel solution, not a new solution. We can get into that again in another video. So to guarantee a strong design process and to guarantee you become a strong designer, we have to touch on the personal process. And that is where most of university and the profession is lacking. They don't really touch upon what is a personal process. Neither does high school do it as well. And so we're really lacking in a defined and structured creative process that guarantees results. It's not taught in uni, it's not taught in high school, it's not taught in the profession. If we specifically talk about uni, which is probably the best place to teach it because you're mature enough maybe and you're heading towards the profession, a lot of it seems to be a lot of assessments, a lot of activities, but there's no sort of, in some ways, softer side of how to navigate you through the troughs and the peaks of successes and failures of design outcomes and design options, right? Assessment-based, requirements, time-based. And that is sort of why the spatial thinking mini studio is more or less, we try and make it a 6-week process. In 6 weeks, normally one of my professional competitions could be 6 weeks. So it's not like it's impossible to do a whole project in 6 weeks. But the mini studio in spatial thinking is meant to be either anywhere between a casual or intensive process. But 6 weeks is a nice time. It's half a semester. It's 1.5 months. And it's in some ways, we don't want you to finish an entire project. We just want some part of the design process. And the end goal is to just feel good about it, right? To get to some defined outcome, whether it's a sketch, a piece of writing, a reflection, or even a design, some kind of nice part of the design process to feel good about. And the point of that is both having a set outcome that you can remember for the rest of your design career, which sometimes is rare in a university project or professional project, because by the time you get to your end, either interim or end of the university project or professional project, often you would say, oh, well, I wanted to do this, but I didn't get to there. I ran out of time. Or the tutor told me this and I spent all this time doing that and ended up doing this. And all these excuses or dead ends or, not excuses in a bad way, but excuses in that, there could be a variety of factors that you didn't get to some kind of place that you could have got to. And so Mini Studio aims to remove all those excuses and just really focus on what defined outcome can we get. Whether you need an intense or casual process, up to you. It's once a week, probably casual, right? And so that is that difference. And that creative process, the design process needs to be personal, needs to be a journey, needs to be experienced. And these requirements can sometimes get in the way. It is almost like the difference between, some of those Waldorf or Montessori ways of teaching in primary school or high school, different to normal public school or normal private school, where the typical education system for high school and primary is structured tests and, learning subjects in separate places. And the reaction to that was some of these other different educational pedagogies that are different, which focus on play. Now, the process of play has sort of become a lot more popular over the years. But I think it's interesting to compare that, because that sense of play is definitely more conducive to teaching design process and creative process than a structured assessment-based thing. Now, I will never say I will prefer this play system versus structure system, because you need both. You can't live in a life where there is no structure. I'll get into the concept of friction of opposites in another, the spatial thinking friction of opposites in another video. But basically, you can't be creative if you don't know where you're going, but you can't know where you're going and start from scratch, but you still sort of need to feel your way through. So you need to play, but you also need a goal. And so you need both. You can't just sort of endlessly play with no aim, but you can't always just go for a goal with no play, right? So that is I said I was going to make this short, but I don't think I can, right? The design process and creative process, that is sort of trying to talk about exactly what we're talking about. The uniqueness that comes from the spatial thinking process is almost like a scientific method of getting from nothing to something and guaranteeing results. It's almost a process that you can't argue against. Basically, we go through the same things as how potentially university teaches it, or the profession teaches it. But every single step along the way, there is a link on why are you doing this, where it goes to next. There's 3 stages: observe, abstract, translate. And any stage that you're in, I can probably help you link where you've gone to and where you're going to next. I don't think university does that. For example, a lot of my students are supposed to do something called site analysis, which is basically analyzing the site in architecture. And the university just says, just do it. But they won't teach you how to do it, or why you should do it this way, or what's the best outcome. Most people confuse site analysis with just producing diagrams. But that's not it. That's really not it. If you can't respond to the site in the initial phase of the architectural project, then you've lost an entire chunk of the purpose of the brief, which is to respond to the site. But the university doesn't always teach you how to respond to site, nor does the profession. Because in the professional world, we can kind of get away with the loose response to site. Because, we're running a business, and business is not always effective and efficient. Innovation doesn't always come out on the top priority of things. But if you're a design business or you're an architectural business, my argument is you should be always thinking about innovation. Anyway, I'm going to stop with this video. I hope that sort of clarifies a few things. And of course, yes, it was a bit longer than I expected. Shoot me, it's a creative process, right? But I hope I've helped clarify, basically talking about that specific process from going from blank page to a guaranteed outcome, and exactly how do we do it. It is structured in the spatial thinking framework. But of course, each and every individual will have their blockages in different ways. And the guarantee that I make is we will see where those blockages are more than any other design process or creative process that you've been taught. I can guarantee you that. Or I can't guarantee every single other creative process, but I can guarantee that we would be one of those that can guarantee results. Even if you can find some other process that's better, we would be able to do as much, a little bit less, a little bit more, but definitely structured and guaranteed. Okay. Again, if you want to find out more, go to spatialthinking.co. Check out the landing page, join the community, and learn more about the spatial thinking framework. We run mini studios every week. We have one-on-one coaching, and just check it out. All right. Thanks.